We're good.
There we
Hi.
go. All right.
We're
So,
good.
how's it going?
Good. Good. So this week, this time, I guess I should say, we wanted to talk. Okay. All right. Let's talk about your skills project. You've taken your entire workflow that you've used for a long time now, that has allowed you to do things like build an entire assembly toolchain, which we'll talk about later, and do all your crazy projects and things that you're building so effectively with Claude and Claude Code, and now Codex even. And you've taken all those skills and the whole workflow that you use, you put it into a set of like more generalized skills that aren't just specific to your machine, and you put it into a GitHub repo. Can you tell me about that GitHub repo, and selfishly tell me how to use it so that I can go and build really cool things on my own as well?
Yeah. So I mean, this kind of started back. Cloud Code came out, and I just spent months every single day trying to figure out how to get good results out of these things, and started building up when skills became a thing. Started using that as my main vehicle for trying to get like a reusable workflow that I knew would be getting consistent results. And every time running through building something, I would notice, okay, it's having a problem with X or with Y, and then I'd try to go back to the start of like, what's wrong with my skills, or what's wrong with the initial prompts for these things, and how did I not set it up for success? What did I not give it in order to do the task properly? Because I was pretty confident even back then with Sonnet 4. I don't remember what the big model was at the time that I started this with, but those models were still super capable, and I had this mentality of, I know that it can do the thing, I just need to figure out how to guide it the right way to get the results that I want. And so, like, rather than, what was the metaphor I've seen before of, like, if you're running a factory, you don't criticize the one guy in the assembly line that's not putting, the bolt in the right spot properly. You go look at the process that leads to him not doing that properly, and like, you take a step back, and then you try to get your whole line running smoother. And so that was my mentality on this, of, I'm not going to really blame the model for this, because I'm quite confident I've seen it get good results. They're inconsistent, and I know that it's capable of getting the results that I want. I need to figure out what is the process around this, to do that. So I started building skills, and I would kind of tweak them over time. I started with really just one. Last summer, that was the core one that I called the autonomous development skill, and that was kind of the basis of the Ralph loop concept. So you'd have a bash loop that's just running Claude Code in headless mode, and the prompt for that, the entire prompt was, run your autonomous development skill, and it would go load the skill, and it would take actions based on whatever was in that file at the time. And then I would just
Cool.
tweak that file continuously as I noticed that that loop was giving me what I want or didn't want. I would go change how that skill works.
So,
And
so sorry if I can interrupt. That was basically you were turning the Ralph loop from a like set of like a text that you would put into the prompt to like the Ralph prompt was in that skill, for example, and you were just tweaking that over all your different projects, which to me that makes sense because it's a central place that's version controlled that you can manage, that you can share across your projects, that and it also makes it easy for you to like write and clearly see the whatever bash loop or whatever you decided to use to create that Ralph loop, like the harness for it. It's short. It's just like refer to that skill. So that's what you were doing for all your Ralph loops,
yes, I mean, the very first Ralph loop was just the
right?
normal literal bash loop of, you have a prompt string here that says, I have a markdown spec file, and I want you to go look at it and go look at the implementation code and find a gap and make some changes to bring it closer into alignment with that spec. Like, that was the core of the Ralph loop back when Jeff Huntley put that out. And that was a great start, I found, but it wasn't, there's a lot for it to track. Then if you have a 5,000 line markdown file that has all of the different behaviors and requirements that you want from your project, and then it has to go audit 10,000 lines of code in whatever your language is, and then compare the two. And that's a lot for it to go do. And it would burn a lot of tokens, and it would get confused. It would lose track of what it's doing. And so I tried to give it more structure over time. And so I'd give it specific goals of, okay, here's the gigantic spec. we're not going to tackle all of this in one shot. Let's pick one thing, go see if that thing has been implemented or not. And if it hasn't, then go implement it. And if it has, go look for another thing, or like, and then kind of keep notes on where you've looked at and stuff like that. And like, that was kind of doing some things too. It was getting there a little bit, but still wanted more, like more structure to it. But not a lot of structure. There's a lot of teams and people that are putting a lot of work into harnesses and tools and memory systems and different things, and really want to keep it as simple as possible, and just, you know, don't overthink everything, but have some kind of consistent process. You know, like as a human, when I go to sit down to work on a project, I kind of have a big backlog of features that need to be built or bugs that need to be fixed. And I'm going to pick one of those things and work through it and then call it a day. And that was still kind of the idea for the Ralph loop, but I'm going to help it a little bit on the picking a thing, because I already know what's been done or not. And so I would kind of act as the project manager a little bit there. And then so I implemented a project planning skill. Then that would be kind of the first pass for this whole thing.
Wait, sir, so you're talking about like this is how you formed the skill structure?
Yeah, so
okay,
kind of
this isn't what you do
of, like,
now.
how this stuff kind of came to be
Got
here.
it.
So like started with just like the bash loop Ralph skill thing of just the Ralph prompt in a file. It would go run that, do the thing. It would get lost a lot. It was okay. It gave me some decent results, but that was like the core of the epitome of AI slop. It would just do stuff.
Yeah.
And that's not what I want. So I thought, okay, I need a planning stage in here of queuing up the work that Ralph is going to go do, rather than just having Ralph pick stuff at random and work through it. And at that point, maybe it's not really Ralph anymore, because that's just Ralph just bumbles around as a character, and things happen, and that's great for him, but that's not great for his software.
We're starting to diverge a little bit from the original metaphor, basically.
Yes. And so like I don't really refer to it as a Ralph loop from like none of my scripts say Ralph anywhere. It's just the autonomous dev loop, whatever. That's just what it runs. And so then I, worked into being an architect role or a PM role or whatever, where I'm doing some planning. So I have a skill for planning that says I want to work on feature X. The skill walks through a process of researching current implementation, researching prior art in the industry, researching documentation around the libraries that are being used, pull all that together with the goal of whatever the new feature is, interview me to understand if there's critical pieces that it hasn't understood properly, and then go write out a giant plan. And then it turns that plan then into now tickets. When Beads came out back in October, that was a huge unlock, because I could, prior to Beads, I could have Ralph just, say, okay, the skill is now go look at the plan document and just work through the kind of the checklist or whatever is in there. And that kind of worked, but it would also still lose track of things. It would forget to update the file. It would do it inconsistently. It would leave too many notes, and now the file is 80,000 tokens and it can't read it properly, and confusing stuff. So Beads came out, and I added an extra step then of we have this plan document of all the phases that we want to work through, convert that into beads, and then tell Ralph, pick the next ready bead and work on it, and then exit. And that became an amazing loop actually at that point, because it had a queue basically of here's the stuff that's ready. There's a dependency graph under the hood so that it's not going to work on something out of order. It just runs the bd ready command and says, okay, there's 3 items. I'm going to pick whatever the highest priority one is, and I'm going to go do that. And then it would do it, and it would exit. And that just was huge just on its own right there, because it had a single focus. It didn't have the entire spec to distract it with all these different concerns and stuff. It just said, okay, I'm going to do this one thing. And it could do it excellently. That was really great. But notice that the plan document itself that was making those beads issues had problems. It would have gaps or different inconsistencies in it. And so then the beads then would have inconsistencies in them, where something following would reference something by a different name, or something that was never even implemented because the step to implement it got skipped somehow in the plan. So added another little mini skill in the middle of reviewing plans. And so that's a separate Claude session. So like first Claude session, write a plan. Next Claude session, review the plan, where we go through with a ton of subagents and look at all the different aspects of it, figure out, are there gaps, are there inconsistencies, contradictions, is there missing research, is there missing anything else, and you go, fix it all up. And then from there, then you can turn it into tickets. I use tickets now rather than beads, but that became the process. And now this is really dialed in at this point, where we have a kind of a structure that's agnostic to any project. It's all just a workflow for it to go through of plan out a feature, review the plan to make sure it actually makes sense, convert it into a dependency graph for implementation, and then now a skill to go just burn through all of that work and build it out. And that's the essence of what is in this repository here. Is there's a few other extra skills around that, but like that's the crux of it, and that's the workflow that I go through now for everything. Is I'm involved in the very first step of the planning just to make sure that everything is what I want it to be, and then the reviewing skill will stop if there's anything critical that it's found that's like this is wildly inconsistent or this doesn't make any actual sense or whatever. It will stop and say, what is it that you want here? And then I can go answer that couple of questions and it can go carry it on. But otherwise, it fully resolves everything else by itself.
So it has one of the skills, the reviewer skill, is like it's set up in a way that whenever there's the model sees like is uncertain about something, about an action to take, it will prompt you.
Yes. It used to do that a lot, actually. It would go through, it did a review, and it would come up with, here's 45 issues with this plan of.
Oh, so this was still in the planning process. This review part
so
is still. I see.
Yeah, the review is part of the planning. So it's kind of just like the grooming phase in the normal SDLC of you have, your make up a PRD, and then you go do some research and you have some spikes and stuff, and you come back and say, well, okay, this doesn't make actual sense with how the world works. You go update your plans and stuff. And then once everything is kind of groomed out and you have your Jira tickets or whatever, then people can go start building it. And so there's a bunch of upfront planning, and just kind of mimic that of do a bunch of upfront planning, review the plan to see if it makes sense. My initial review thing had it basically check with me for every inconsistency that it found, and that was a lot. And I was just finding myself constantly saying, it would say, here's a recommended option, and I would say, it give me a big list. It would say, here's 15 inconsistencies I found. Here's A, B, C, and D for each one, and I would be like A, B, B, C, D, A. I wouldn't even say any other words. I would just literally just type A space B space A space whatever, submit that, and it would go fix it all up. And almost all of the times, those were the recommended options as well. And so I thought, why am I even putting an input here? Just if you have a clear recommendation based on your research, there's a very clear path forward, do that and just update the plan. And so now it only pauses to ask me things if there's something that really sticks out as like, this doesn't make any sense at all, or this is not technically feasible for some reason. It'll stop for that. But everything else, it regularly will say, okay, I found 32 issues that have now been autonomously resolved, and the plan is in a great state. Go ahead and build it. And like these are, that's at that point it just kind of works. It also has a kind of a gate at the end of it that where the AI can pause and also say, well, I did find a lot of gaps here. I'm not totally sure that I addressed all of them, so I recommend you do another review cycle. And so you exit that Claude session, start up another one, and say, also go, run your plan review skill against those plans, and it will go through and do it again.
You still need to go in the order. So you still need to kind of like guide it. Like you'll go through into Claude Code, for example, and you'll start with like run the the planning skill, and so to help me put a plan for this project, and then that planning skill will ask you questions, and like you kind of give it a we're kind of walk me through that planning process and like what you would actually do a project.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I have an idea for something that I want to exist. So I start a new Claude session. I say, run your project planning skill.
Right.
And then I'll usually just do a new line and do kind of a brain dump on what it is that I want to plan out. And then it'll go run the skill and take whatever I gave it there and do some initial passes at research, just to kind of understand current implementation and everything else around what might be involved there, and then they'll come back to me with questions and have kind of this interview session where I answer whatever it might need to know from my end. Have a bunch of strong wording in the skill now where if it's an open question that should have a clear answer by doing more research, just go do more research.
Okay.
So it'll go read documentation online, it'll go read more code, it'll do that in waves until it really has fully understood things. And then it's just anything that's kind of outside of that, where it's project, vision, context, what we're trying to do, or if there's any outside technical constraints or something like that, it'll stop for those things. But if there's a clear, obvious path forward that can be resolved just by doing research, it will go do that and figure it out.
Do you heavily use subagents, like in those skills? Do you tell it to use subagents in parallel?
Yes, everything is
Okay.
subagents.
Okay,
So like the main agent is just orchestrating the workflow and fanning out waves of subagents to go do all of the actual heavy lifting.
Nice.
So for the initial planning skill, it starts with my brain dump, and we'll go fan out a set of researchers, usually 3 to 5 subagents, to go out and kind of crawl the world to get the initial set of what's the scope here. And then if there's gaps, it'll do another wave after that as well, and kind of get a really good sense of everything. But none of that is supposed to feed back to the main agent. Those agents report back little summaries of what they found and report everything else into files in a temp directory. And then
Okay.
once all of that content has kind of been brought together, then part of the skill then goes into like the next orchestration phase is a go review all of that content with another set of subagents to
So they don't report it back. They just put it all in an attempt file, and
yeah.
then the next phase is going through and reviewing them. Is that part is still the same phase where the orchestrator has another set of subagents go through? So like you don't have to go and launch another like review phase of that
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of waves of subagents going on in here.
from the
There's a lot
same
of
skill.
yeah, from the same skill. It's
Okay,
all this project planning skill. It just goes top
got
to
it.
bottom, waves of subagents, wave
Okay,
after wave after wave,
nice.
and it has so initial researching ones, and then like an aggregation one that might
Okay,
kick in if all of the research totals 300,000 tokens of content or something like that.
yeah,
Then you can't have one subagent tackle that. So
yeah,
then it'll do some other subagents to kind of comb that down into something that's like what's the actual truly relevant bit of
right.
content that goes to this plan. And then a round of subagents for doing the actual planning based on all of that research content and the goals that we have. Let's make up an actual plan.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of keeps carrying on with that, with subagents that have specific chunks of the planning process assigned to them, and they go and do that piece, report back that they completed it, if they ran into a problem or not, and there's more that needs to be done or something for their piece. Maybe that does happen. The orchestrator agent knows what to do with that because it's in the skill. So it just keeps working through with subagents.
Got it.
Uses a lot of tokens. It takes quite a while sometimes. Like if it's an advanced feature, that thing can just run by itself for up to an hour or so, just doing all this.
A question I was going to follow up about this, but I think is is relevant right now. Is like, is this you mentioned like feature multiple times? Is this something that you use for feature development? Do you use it? Is it better for greenfield projects? Like, what's the do you go through this process every time you want to do like a new feature within something you're developing?
Um, yes, it depends on the scope. I have
Okay.
kind of a just internal threshold for if it's something that I know Claude can handle just in one session as a
Sure.
one-off
Okay.
thing, I would
So
just
for
go
big
open a
things,
Claude session and tell it what to do, and it'll go
right?
do it. But if I know that it's something it's not going to be able to handle in one session, then that's where these skills come in, and it you know it will funnel through the whole planning thing and reviewing, getting a bunch of tickets. Usually there'll be like 20 to 90 tickets that come out of this whole process.
Oh,
And then
okay.
that's where that looping comes in to just work through all of those.
Okay, I see. So the result of this planning process is creating a bunch of tickets. Like the outcome is a bunch of tickets, which you will then use the next skill, which I don't think you've talked about yet, but the next skill to go through those tickets and just start working through them. And then by the end of that, once that's done, the tickets will all be cleared. Then at that point, you could go and create like go through this planning process again for another huge feature, or even halfway through it, you could probably go through and create like go through this planning process to create more tickets. Although I'd imagine that could result in some conflicts when it comes to like ordering which ones to do, and maybe like you don't want to try to have it work on too much at once, right?
Yeah, It can do it. I try to keep things a little bit more focused. Just
Okay.
even for my own, I have timeline expectations and
Yeah.
things, and so I have done it a few times where I'll do a bunch of plans. They're all kind of touching different areas of
Mm,
the project, so I know that they can be worked on independently. But those would usually better be done in separate work trees where each
yeah.
work tree can
Makes
focus on
sense.
that and then merge it all back together in the end. Whereas if I just flood the main um, if I put it all in, my main development branch, then now I've got 300 open tickets, and I can't really run
Right.
the loop, concurrently against that because they're going
Yeah.
to step on each other's toes, and so then it's just one worker basically that's chewing through the entire
Got
uh,
it.
backlog of stuff at that point, and it'll do it. It's just it's going to take some time, and I really want certain things done before other things, and
Mm,
I can get in the middle of that too. I can tweak my prompts to on the loop to say focus
right.
on feature X first if there's anything open there, and it'll go do that. But it's just easier to just I have a new idea, work tree, go do planning over
Right.
there. I can have 9 work trees running at once if I really want with all different things or different projects or whatever.
I,
um,
I feel like it would almost be better to, and this is just like my initial thought on this, is that j- to prevent, so you'll end up with a bunch of bird conflicts inevitably if you do that, if you have a whole bunch going on at once, which I try to avoid as much as possible, especially if it's just me working on a project. In
yes.
which case, it's almost better to just use a whiteboard or just a piece of paper, whatever, and write down, here's a list of the next things that I want to do. And while I know that development happens much faster now than it did even like 2-3 months ago, so this may be less of an issue. Like you can go through the first one fast enough that the second one happens just like after you've thought of it. But even just keeping a list of here's the features, or like a roadmap, like I've seen you do with Ticket, for example, like have a roadmap of these are the things I eventually want to get to. You're not putting all the tickets in at once, but you at least have somewhere to store temporarily like your ideas down of what you want to work on, so that you can eventually come back to that one next, knowing that like you just followed this process and it's most effective to focus on one thing at a time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. There's kind of outside things you can do, I think, to manage. It's project management at that point. Like,
Yeah,
what
it's
order do
true.
you want things to be done in?
Very true.
Where are the clean divisions to be able to say, okay, we can actually have 2 developers working on these
Right.
things together, or in parallel, and we'll
Yeah.
integrate it later, and all of that bit. Um, and that a lot of that still really comes down to like the human judgment around priorities and
Yeah.
what we actually want to build.
Yeah.
The AIs are terrible at they have no taste whatsoever. They don't know good design. Like they know it's weird, right? Because they know all of the design patterns, they know all of the
Hmm.
architecture, they know how to build all of the things. But if you just let them make their own choices on the what and the
Mm.
when and the why, it's going to be weird and wrong. And so that's where
Mm.
we still need to be on top of things,
I
is
see.
the picking what is the next thing we're going to do and what shape is
Oh.
that going to take, and then whatever shape you want it to be, it knows how to do all of that already, so it can go do it for you. But you have to define that shape for it.
So you think for now the role of a human, because this is something I grapple with regularly now, like it's an existential thing that we briefly talked about in the last time we talked, but it's what is the role of the human now? Like what is a thing that we can uniquely do that is significantly better? And this will almost certainly change over time, but for now it's our best differentiator and the best leverage that we have that's different from what an LLM can do is understanding the why, understanding the when, the order, like basically project management and direction, um, is where we can work best, versus the LLM is like you give it a task, it can do that task really, really well, but it doesn't know what tasks to do beforehand, it doesn't know why, and it doesn't know when. And maybe this is like I don't need to like diverge into another topic too much, but like I wonder if this is why I'm skeptical of OpenClaw. I'm skeptical from a security perspective. Actually, not skeptical. It's like I'm certain from a security perspective it's a terrible idea. However, I wonder that's why we haven't heard. Like I think a lot of the excitement around OpenClaw is just novelty, and I think that there's and all these other like me too, like different versions of OpenClaw that people are building. But I think that there's we haven't seen a lot of like really great breakthrough use cases. It's almost like what VR was like, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I love VR.
Yep.
I was a huge user of VR. I still have a bunch of VR systems, and I developed in VR. Like I love that, but it was like there was never a clear, this is the killer use case for this thing. This is where it is better than anything else that we have right now. I feel like OpenClaw is kind of like in that state. Not that it can't ever get there. Sure, I'm sure it can. The more people pour resources into it, like I'm sure it'll get there. But for now, I think a lot of it's novelty because the value of an LLM is still like they can't quite do the things that humans can do when it comes to project management and the why and the when and the like why it matters basically and what order to do it in.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know.
mean,
Without diverging too much, that's what do you think about that?
yeah, I mean, so I mean that does feed right into this because they they can do a bunch of that stuff, which is a little bit disturbing part,
Mm,
and that's really what these skills lean on is,
mm,
you know, I'm setting ultimate direction and setting architectural constraints and direction and things. I know what patterns are going to fit into the future of this project best compared to other patterns that we could adopt, and which if I let the AI just do things, it would probably do because that's closer to the normal in the training data distribution or
right,
something. Um,
right.
like there's the very common, if you just have Claude Go make a website for you, it's going to have that weird purple gradient on it because
Yeah.
that's like the right down the center of the training data for
Yeah.
whatever reason, and it's gonna do it in Next.js, and it's gonna do like there's certain things
Right.
that's just gonna kind of default to because that's what
Mm,
it's that's somewhere in the middle of the distribution there, and it's just gonna do it that way. If you want anything outside of that, that's where you have to set kind of the framework for it and say,
mm,
okay, in this project we are using these patterns and these languages and these libraries, and we want it to have this shape to it. And when you give it that, though, it's gonna work great inside of it. It's just if you leave it, people have the same problem though too. Like there's a whole thing around constraints being a driver for creativity,
yeah.
and if you just give somebody a blank
True.
piece of paper, they have no idea what to do with it. But
Right.
if you give them a little bit of a few shapes on it, they can start connecting dots
Mm.
and draw the owl or whatever the meme is
Oh,
there, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Um, and this if you have too many options available to you, you get
Right.
into that analysis paralysis
Yeah.
thing, and AIs don't really get paralyzed. They will just pick something that's not
True.
optimal, and that if that's what you want, that's fine, but I need
Right.
better than that.
So
So
we are
that's
we
where
are effectively like our differentiators as guides of like or oracles or I don't know shepherds. Like I don't know what the best metaphor or analogy is, but basically like we our differentiator, like the thing that humans do better right now is like maybe forcing those constraints or maybe setting long-term horizon goals because perhaps the LLM is limited by the context window and how long-term horizon it can actually think, right?
yeah, 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 no, exactly. So it would do great if you can set that for it, and if you don't, then you're going to get that's where the slop comes in, I
Yeah.
think, and that's the majority of the things. And like OpenClaw, okay, the other thought that I'm having here, I don't know if, have we talked about the bitter lesson before? Has that phrase come up
No.
as a thing? So there's this paper from 2017 or so. It's really short. Just you can look it up and have a read through it at some point. But basically, the core thesis of this was that scaling compute has always and theoretically will always outperform any novel architectures or things that you might think up to make machine learning do what you need. So rather than getting really, really, you know, fine tuning your parameters for the model that you're building, or putting a lot of thought into the structure of the training process, or like it was very specifically geared to AI development rather
Mm.
than AI use. But I'm finding it applies both in both places. Of
Mm-hmm.
if you put a whole ton of work into your crazy harness that gives it all of these things, it's not as effective in the long run as just waiting for the model to get better and throwing more compute at letting it burn through things. And so my my whole two things for getting good results, I think kind of mentioned this on other chats, is everything comes down to feedback loops and how many tokens you're willing to spend. And
Mm.
that if you get the loops tight enough and you let the AI churn away inside of those loops long enough, you will get exactly what you want. And if you're not getting what you want, it's because either you haven't given it mechanisms to get feedback properly and to verify that it's doing the right thing, or you haven't let it burn enough tokens, basically. And so like that's what all of these skills are kind of geared around, is the not the feedback loop part, because that's really project dependent. Like if you have a good test harness, if you have your static type feedbacks, if you have browser testing tools that let it go exercise UIs for you, like all these different ways that it can check if it's done the right thing. That's very project specific. I don't have a general purpose thing for that. But on the scaling compute side, where we really just want to spend more tokens for like thinking through the planning process, if I just say CLAUDE, go make a plan for this crazy big thing, and it doesn't use any subagents, it's got 200,000 tokens to work with to do all of that planning. It's gonna, and by the end of it, it's gonna hallucinate and forget a half of the things that it found earlier in the session. And so subagents come in as a way to just scale up. Now, that main agent can oversee processing 2 million tokens instead of 200,000. And each one of those subagents in there might use 50 or 100,000 tokens, and it might use 30 subagents. And that lets it scale out on the compute side, just churning through the little aspects of the problem from all the different angles that it needs, and then breaking that up into then more top level sessions. So having a project planning session to get kind of all of the high level things in there, and then reviewing it where we burn another million tokens on making sure that all the gaps are closed. And then we go into a brand new session again to review all of the plans and figure out how to break it into the dependency graph of tickets cleanly. And then finally, new fresh sessions with the whole Ralph loop, where it looks at the next thing and it focuses exclusively on that one thing and works through it, and constantly with fresh eyes in the world. It doesn't have prior any context that it's carrying around, which means that it has to burn more upfront to understand, okay, where am I in this project, and how do I get oriented, and what is this task that I need to work on, and what's all the stuff that's involved in that. That might take it 50,000 tokens to work through at the start of its session before it even gets productive. But then it's going to go do that one thing perfectly. And then it'll shut down, and then the next one comes up, and it might be a new task that's directly related to the first one, and it has to go rediscover all of those things. But it will do it, and then it'll understand the current state of the world with that first task completed. It knows now here's the second task. It's going to go do it. It's going to do it perfectly. And that's the whole thing. It's just, how can I make this take more tokens is like a regular question I have, of how can I decompose the problem into a few more steps that more subagents or more main agents can burn tokens against. And but like not overthinking things. I just want to, all of the skills are just around decomposing the workflow rather than big, like trying to make the harness smarter in any kind of way.
So just breaking down, like, it sounds like a lot of this, the theme that we keep coming back to is focus. Like whether it's about focusing on a single feature at a time, or breaking that down into single things that the autonomous development loop can actually focus on. It's about focus and keeping that tight. And that and tight feedback loops is another thing. So kind of to also repeat what you just said about the two things that you need to get best results. You need tight feedback loops, and you need lots of tokens to burn, specifically leveraging those through subagents so you don't use all those tokens in a single context window. Is that correct?
Yes, that's, I think, exactly correct. And that's why I had been really, like I couldn't get good results out of Codex for the longest time, because Codex has a completely different way of doing context compaction and stuff like that. It does seem to work independently for longer, but it still ultimately has a limited context window. And I mean, GPT 5.4 came yesterday. You can get 1 million tokens, or is it 2 million even in a window now? 1 million, whatever. Gemini's got 2, but they all have that whole needle in a haystack problem, where as that window gets filled up, it's going to forget important details. And I really don't want to use the big window. I want to have it, as small as possible. And it's totally okay to use the first 30 or 40,000 tokens in the window to get oriented properly for the specific thing that needs to be worked on, so long as then in the next 20 or 30,000 tokens after that, it can just do that one thing, and it's going to do it really, really well. And then the window doesn't get too full. It shuts down. It's a brand new, fresh window to go on to the next piece of work. And that is definitely more token expensive. It's also using a lot of subagents during that. Like all of these skills are all subagent orchestration
Good. Yeah.
skills. And so every subagent has to do kind of the same. I'm going to go read the CLAUDE.md file, and I'm going to go, start finding the right code because the prompt says I need to probably go looking over here, but I know there's other stuff involved. And so the subagent is burning tokens and doing all of that
Right.
every time. And the session uses 20 subagents or something. And so like every one of those is burning at least 20,000 tokens off the start, probably getting oriented for its own little piece of the work. So there's 400,000 right there. And, it adds up really fast. But it allows it to be like just laser focused on I'm going to do this thing and it's going to get done perfectly. Like it's really nice like that. And this whole, it just I get what I want from the AIs now at this point.
Okay. I want to go back and make sure we cover the full skills process of that you were talking about. So you mentioned you've gone through the planning skill, like the initial planning skill, then the review skill, and then after that, it's the autonomous development skill. Is that the three?
There's one in the middle there it's a really short one, but it's the plan to tickets skill. So
Right. Oh, it is.
it
So that's
takes
a
the
separate
plan
skill.
document.
Okay.
And yeah, that's a separate skill just because I want a fresh context window that it's not going to lose track of some step in the middle of the plan or something and just forget to make a ticket for it or something
I
like
see.
that.
So the output of the planning skill is a PRD, like basically a plan document. Is that correct?
Yeah, just a big markdown file. It's usually, I don't know, a few thousand lines or something.
Okay.
And then that's the output of the initial planning.
Okay.
And there's a review skill that just goes and refines that same document.
Got it.
To close up any gaps. And then the ticket skill goes and uses that as the input document. Output is a bunch of ticket files that are just the markdown files using that ticket CLI tool. And it's got a dependency graph in there. And then after that is just run the loop with the main dev skill to just work through the tickets. And that's the whole crux of it. And I just have to front load all of my thoughts in that planning phase up front, basically, of here's what I want. And then I still manually start up and shut down the Claude sessions for those. So I'll start up a planning, run through it. I need to be involved in the planning part because it needs to know what I want. But reviewing, it almost never asks me questions at this point, especially Opus 4.6. It knows how to close almost all the gaps unless there's something very, very, like there's a big flaw somewhere, which does happen sometimes. But for the most part, I just start a fresh Claude session, say run plan review for X. It goes and it does it. It comes back 15 minutes later, says, cool, we're good to go on. I close that session manually. I start up a new session. I say, run plan to tickets. And it goes and does its thing. And then I close that session manually and then batch script. And I just let that run. But sometimes I want to see it work. So I will start up a new Claude session and just say, run autonomous development. And it will go do that live so I can kind of watch it work through. I don't need to do that. I just like to do that sometimes. Or I want to see what it's doing and how it's working.
It's also really cool to watch.
Yeah, and I used to need to do like that. I used to have to do that because there were gaps in the skill or something where it's going to kind of get off track or it's going to do a bit of the wrong thing. And so I want to see how it's behaving and then I can refine the skill. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier with if I'm not getting the results I want, there's a process problem here if the inputs that I'm giving to it are not quite right. And so I'm going to go think back. I might throw away everything it did. I'll do a hard reset on the branch or something and think, okay, what is wrong with the skill input here, or what's wrong with the plan that was fed in, or like work back to what it was. What is the root cause there? Fix that and then run it all again, which might even go all the way back to just throw away the plan entirely. And we're going to start from scratch here and plan it from fresh. And do that whole process. And so then I'd run the autonomous development skill manually and just let it work. And I would see if I get what I want out of it. And and just kind of like, just kind of cranking the wheel manually there and it's not a headless bash loop that's just doing things. I'm still in the loop there just to verify that it's actually doing what I want it to. But at this point, it's super well dialed in and I don't need to watch it. I just like to do it sometimes with it. Then, and I'll go and I'll check on it and I'll look at the diff or something that came out of it and go, oh yeah, that's exactly what I would have expected it to do. Perfect. And then, and so like that's the whole process is plan, review the plan, make it tickets, run the loop. And that gets me everything I want. The one piece outside of that is I do have there's a CLAUDE.md.global file
Okay.
in this repo as well, and I put that in my home directory so that
Oh,
every Claude session that I run on the machine has that put into its context, and that has this big section at the top called the maximal simplicity policy, and it's got a
yes.
bunch of there's a bunch of like catchphrasey, memey things that are just like stuff that from people who know what they're doing in the industry
Okay.
have kind of put out there that I know is in the training data. And so if I
Oh,
reference, if I put the word complecting in there, which is not a common word, but that's a very specific word from a Rich Hickey talk around simplicity.
no.
Um, so it picks up on that word instantly, and it knows, okay, we're doing Rich Hickey things here, and we want to think a certain thought process through the problem. And so, like,
Oh
there's
my
a bunch
God.
of these kind of things that are in this document that are certain, kind of triggers for getting it to be maximally simple. So this is my like anti-slop thing
Yeah.
here. Is if this is always in every context window for every Claude session on the machine, I had to go missing one time. I don't know. Like it disappeared, and I had a weird week where I'm like, why is this like? I know that this could have been done in 300 lines of code. Why is there? It just built a whole new factory service thing, and there's 2,000 extra lines of boilerplate around this. And so I'm saying, no, stop doing that. Why are you doing that? Let's go do and trying to manually fix it. And then I'm just in my home directory and notice, oh, this file's not there. And I put it back,
Oh,
and everything fixed itself again. So like I know that it does stuff. It has an
okay.
impact on the work output here, and the whole piece of it is just think through every change that you're making for every diff. Is this the simplest possible implementation for
Mm,
this? If you're adding an extra abstraction layer, that needs to be still the simplest thing that can accomplish the goal here.
mm,
Sometimes the extra complexity is justified because the feature is complex, or fixing the bug, the root cause of the bug is a complex thing, and so there's
mm.
some inherent complexity there. But the AIs love to just throw out every design pattern under the sun, and you get into these crazy states. And so this whole CLAUDE.md file is geared around don't do that. We really want, can this be done in not necessarily fewer lines of code? Sometimes fewer lines is still more complicated than more lines in
Mm-hmm.
a counterintuitive way. So like that's not the only metric, but given the requirements of the task, can this be done simpler? Can this be done with
Mm-hmm.
a more minimal diff? Can we make the change in a different place that would, or can we refactor something else that would ultimately make it easier to implement the real thing over here? A bunch of
Mm-hmm.
that. And so like, sometimes the diff is quite a bit larger because it did have to go do some construction work to
Mm-hmm.
make the ultimate change easier. And there's I don't know if actually the phrase is still in there, but there's the phrase of um, make the hard change easy and then make the easy change or something like that. And so
Okay.
like you get a two-step workflow there. But just a bunch of these kind of little things that nudge the model into the right headspace here for not spamming out insane amounts of code to solve something that doesn't need it. You and so that's like
What's
the skills are kind of the workflow piece, and then this file really has an impact I found on controlling the slop part of it.
where's the repo? I'm trying to look at the repo on your GitHub.
It's just slash skills, I think. So
Oh, slash skills.
I think, or it could be Claude skills.
Because I was going to ask you, do you have Otis skills? Do you have? You should pin this on your GitHub main one.
I should, yeah. I just pushed it yesterday, so gotta
Do
do
you?
some bookkeeping.
I was going to ask you if you had instructions on how to go through this. I see there's an installation, like a setup.sh file.
Yeah. So I mean, the way that I've been doing this, this is kind of a fork from my main skills directory, and so I have the entire under my home directory. There's .claude/skills. I have that whole thing as a Git repo that I maintain from all my personal stuff, and so then to split this out, I kind of had it be the same model of it's just a Git repo of that skills, that kind of global skills directory. I don't think that's the way people should use it, though. I think I run a rewrite most of this README. Claude just kind of put it out there as a base piece, but it's you just basically it's skills. So there's a bunch of markdown files in here. You put them wherever you put skills on your system. For a lot of folks now, that's under the .agents directory instead of Claude because you're using Codex or OpenCode or something else. But so you put the skills wherever you put skills, and then there's this global, prime directive maximum simplicity thing that I find it really has to go into every session. So that's there as well. But you put that wherever you want to put it to be scoped to your projects, and that's it. It's just files.
Yeah, I'm looking at all the different skills you have, and there's more than what you talked about here. Well, like for example, the investigate blocker, create new skill. We don't have to go over that now, but I was curious about is if you had I see a typical workflow where you're talking about kind of the steps to go in order, but it would be great to have maybe this is a blog post, I don't know, an example of going through creating a project and you do this step, then do this step, start by opening Claude Code and saying run this skill to the planning skill and then put a new line, here's the plan. So going through an actual example of for someone that doesn't necessarily know how to use skills as much or has never done an autonomous development loop process like this, which most people haven't. It would be great to just have a reference to be okay, I just import this. All I have to do is follow these instructions and I can build whatever I want. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. That's, I think, a place to go with this. I'm not sure how, there's a delivery mechanism there. Maybe that's, if you've done anything else with AI before, then you can't just clone this into your skills directory because you probably also already have some and you need to have it play nicely there. But yeah, there's a setup piece here probably that I need to figure out what that should look like. But otherwise, yeah, the process is kind of what we talked through. There's a bunch of other skills in here, but most of these actually get pulled in.
I see by
the loop and stuff. So there's one for test-driven development. There's one for called feedback-driven development, which is trying to get the agent to think through, this is a really thorny bug for some reason, and I'm not able to get the visibility or observability on it that I need. And so I need to go create a feedback mechanism for myself to go be able to verify that this thing is working or fixed. And a lot of the times simple, test-driven development is enough there. It just needs to write more tests and it will figure it out. But other times it needs new tooling, or we need to pull in some other project that somebody else has made other tooling that's better for catching this kind of issue or validating this kind of thing. And so that skill is just trying to get the model into being able to do that itself, because otherwise I have to babysit it and make sure that it's got all the right feedback loops. And so it doesn't pull that skill in very often, but it has done that, and it does go kind of course correct based on the results of that. And then there's also that's really it. I think is there's a few extra skills. There's one called investigate blocker that I don't think gets used much anymore, but was needed with earlier models. Opus 4.6 seems to be able to just resolve its own problems, but before what would happen is the autonomous dev skill is running, it's hit something that it can't figure out because maybe its context window is too full or something, but it's got an escape hatch where it says I need help. And it used to just bail out entirely, and I would have to go hold its hand through resolving the issue. But instead now, its instructions are create a ticket called investigation needed as a prefix, and then describe the issue that it's having. It will exit then, and the bash script will notice that, oh, there's a ticket in the queue that needs investigation. So it's going to run another Claude session, but with a different prompt. Instead of run in autonomous development, run investigate blocker. And that one specifically will go look at that ticket, go start doing research, doing whatever it needs to do to understand the problem, figure out what the solution is supposed to be, update the ticket or make a new ticket or whatever. It's not supposed to fix anything. It's just supposed to understand what's going on. And then they'll, have outputs of that. And then the bash loop will go run again, and autonomous development on the next run around will pick up whatever that new stuff is and then go do it.
And it would do that automatically, right?
And that's all automatic at this point. And that was what got the earlier models through a lot of problems that they were having. They would bail out with, I don't know what to do, and I have to step in and kind of guide it through that. But most of that I found my process for that though would be I'd start a new Claude session. I'd say, okay, the last agent found this issue. Go do research, figure out what we should
Right.
do, and then it would come back with a recommendation. And I say, wow, that looks perfect. Go do that.
So
And
you're
so I
just
just made that a skill, and I
right.
said, go, and now I can just go do that. I don't need to be in the loop there because most of the problems, 98% of the time, are things that it can figure out just by looking more. Go read more code, go read documentation, go read whatever. Go just search the web for how people in the wider world solve this kind of problem, and then it comes back and says, okay, here's what we need to do, and
Right.
it's what we need to do. So just feed that back into the loop and let it keep going. So like that's all automated at this point. There is an escape hatch for that escape hatch if it's something that's ultimately it goes, I can't figure this out, I have no idea what's going on. Then it will create a human escalation ticket or something, and the script will see that and then bail out entirely and say, human input is required on this one, and then I can go sit down. But I've not needed that once since the new Opus came out in November, December. There, it figures everything out, which is wild.
So my point earlier about like having an example of like here's how you go through creating a project. We kind of have done that already in this talk basically. So maybe what might be better is in lieu of doing a blog post separately for this, once I publish this, you could just put a link to it in there and be like, because that's basically what we talked about this entire time is how this entire project came to be, how you use it, and pretty in depth. So if you would like afterwards, it might be worthwhile putting that in the repo.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is going on YouTube, right? So I'm sure I could even just poke Gemini at that too and say, so in this video, I outlined exactly how to use this repository here, distill that down into 2 paragraphs or something, and have it do that. And then, I think I want to rewrite most of this README. Actually, I don't think it flows very well, and doesn't really. That's all you need. Get the skills in there. Run A, B, C, D, and it's right now that's not automated. I feel like that could be automated too, though. Of you really only need to run an initial thing where it's going to walk you through the planning process and doing that interviewing, brain dumping piece, and then after that, all of the rest of it could be like an orchestrator skill that just runs the plan review, it runs the ticket breakdown, and it runs the loop, and it that can be fully automated at this point, and they could notice, it could then be watching and say, okay, the plan review found this critical problem, I need to go escalate that and bring me in at that point. And same with the main dev loop, if that runs into a problem, the orchestrator could watch that, and so like then I wouldn't need to babysit it. And again, that's another, how can I throw more tickets at this problem, or I mean more tokens at this problem, and that would work really well. I think I just haven't taken the time to do that because I still like to watch it work to make sure that everything's going smoothly. But at this point, latest top models are ridiculously good, and I'm pretty positive that I'm just doing that for myself at this point, and there's no reason that I should be looking at these things anymore. It's just going to do the work. The quality level is dialed in. I get really good code out the other side, and the features work, and that it's just
the sky's the limit.
So it really is that, and so like I could make this more hands off, I think, and turn it into some that's actually going into that whole software factory model of you just feed in plans and ideas on one end and you get working software at the other side. And I think that this is basically that, except that takes more tokens, and I'm already hitting my Claude Max weekly limits quite regularly, so I don't want to hit them even faster with something that's just like kind of bookkeeping that I don't mind really looking at, and I can kind of queue it at my own pace then, whereas if I had an overseer agent that's walking through the workflow, I don't need to touch it. It's going to get done really, really fast. I don't need it done that fast. It's going to take more of my limit. It'd be great to just have some, unlimited spending account with these things, though. And
wouldn't it, though? Wouldn't it just be the best?
Yeah, because there's, I think like this is the core of, I think, a process that makes robust, reliable software at this point. And
well, for people that for example, work in a company like where I work, we have an enterprise plan which doesn't have those same limits. I mean, there's still always limits that you can set, but like it doesn't have the same weekly limits that you get in a Claude Code Max plan. And so people that are in that particular environment using Claude Code Teams or Enterprise, like at that point, you can use this particular process and don't have to worry about necessarily hitting the limits. Obviously, given your spending limits of your company, but use this process to kind of like, here's your tool chain, your workflow, here's the tool that you can use to now go and build whatever software you want to build in the most effective way possible using AI agents.
Yeah, yeah.
And this works with Codex just as well, right?
It does, yeah. So that was the part I discovered yesterday. Actually, it was GPT 5.4 comes out, and they got rid of the dash Codex variant. They've just merged it as one big happy GPT family now, and it outperforms previous base GPTs on all the other things, and then it also outperforms all of the Codex variants on coding things. So it's just one really solid model.
Wow.
And the Codex CLI has subagents, and it has good skill support and everything. And so yesterday I tried this out on a couple of different things where everything I have is Claude Code oriented. So I still have my CLAUDE.mds and stuff. And so my base prompt then to Codex was a little bit different, where I said, from this directory, walk up all the way to my home directory and find all the CLAUDE.md files and read all of those first, because that's where all my stuff is. And then I symlinked my Claude skills directory into a .agent skills directory so that it has all the same skills, because skills are cross compatible now. Just that directory naming convention is annoying. But then I just said, go find all the CLAUDE.mds just to get the right base context here, and simplicity policy thing loaded up, and then run the autonomous development skill. And it went and it ran it, and it chewed through a bunch of work and everything, and it did it excellently. Actually, I'd never gotten actually good results with this process from Codex before. And it does.
The two things I want to say: one, highlight subagents in Codex. That's probably the reason why you can do so much more now than you could before. But the second thing I want to ask is I just want to clarify. You said go through and read all the CLAUDE.md files. Is that like to convert them to agentic.md files, or like what? Sorry, where were these
just to read them,
files?
just to load them. So like CLAUDE.md or agents.md, depending on your harness, would just get automatically injected at the start of your session. And so because the file names are CLAUDE.md, they don't get loaded into Codex automatically. So I had to go explicitly go read all of these files that it should have anyway. I'm sure I could symlink them or something, but I wasn't also sure. GPT used to behave very differently if you have like strongly worded system prompts and stuff. It would over focus or hyper fixate on things. And that was part of why I felt I was not getting good results for Codex previously, is because these instructions have language that works really good with Claude. And that doesn't mean it's going to work with GPT. And in a lot of cases, it will actually make GPT perform worse because it doesn't respond well to strong instructions. They call that out actually in their prompting guides on the OpenAI docs, is, don't use any all caps bolded stuff in your prompts, because it's going to hyperfixate on that as a thing. And Claude does respond really well to that, and those kind of things can make it perform better. And so that's the kind of language that I have in these things. But 5.4 here seems to have understood, it didn't hyperfixate on weird constraints or anything. It just followed the workflow that I wanted it to follow. And it has subagents now. There's a feature that you can enable with the Codex CLI to do that. It's had that for at least a month now. I think maybe in January they shipped that as a hidden feature. It wasn't even in the main features list, and it was called Collab, I think, at the time. But you could do Codex features, enable Collab, and then it would toggle that on secretly in the config file. And it worked. It was a feature that existed. Subagents, you could make it do things, but I think GPT 5.2, 5.3, they were not good at using that tool. They hadn't been trained on how to do that effectively. And so they would launch a bunch of subagents, and they would be kind of overlapping in weird ways, or it'd be checking on them in weird ways, or it would say like, while those are doing this, I will go do X, and it would step on the toes of its own subagents and stuff. It was really weird stuff I was getting out of it. But from what I saw with 5.4 yesterday, all of that is fixed. It's using the subagents really effectively. And I was very surprised actually with how well it was working. So I feel like all of this was very friendly to Codex now at this point, and that means that you can probably use this with any harness and model under the sun, I would think.
Yeah.
But I do think you need, like, if you want the best results, you do need the top model, right? If you
Yeah.
just go with whatever the latest open source ones are or something, they're very capable. All of this stuff was working great with Sonnet 4, and
Yeah.
even for a period, I was doing Haiku 4.5 as my
I
main
remember. Yeah.
driver for probably 2 months there until the new Opus came out, and Haiku did very solid work also
Yeah.
following all of this. So like it does work well with lesser models, but if you really want like the best results out of it, because Haiku, or if you're using, I don't know, Kimi 2.5 or something, like
Yeah.
they it will work. They're not as good, I think, at the upfront planning part. They can
Okay.
probably do the implementation part pretty decently,
I see.
um, but they don't think through things enough, or like
Mm,
for the high level picture of what you're trying to accomplish, especially with the simplicity constraint on it too. Is okay, we've got this big thing, we want to go build it. What is the essence of it, and what is that? And like, I use Opus for all of the planning at this point, and it really spends a lot of time thinking through all of the constraints and possible contradictions and conflicts and
hmm.
things, and like the ways that this aligns with the current state of the world, and does a lot. Whereas the other models, they just won't do that, and that it works. It's just the results are not going to be the same. So
Yeah.
I always want to use whatever the top models. I think GPT 5.4 would do this great as well. I'll probably be testing that out more next
Yeah.
week and stuff. But for now, it does seem like we have two very good families of models for this kind of work, which is awesome.
Yeah. Okay. That's amazing. One thing, going back to your CLAUDE.md files, do you have CLAUDE.md files in different subdirectories of your project? Is that why you had it read through all those CLAUDE.md? I still am like caught
Yes.
on like, oh, okay, that makes sense
Yes.
then. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, the Claude, like the harness will walk up the directory tree all the way to just root, and any Claude.md files it finds in there will it'll pull in, and then also if you have a,
Why?
that's just how it works.
Until the root of the project or the root
No, to
of
the root of
your
your system, like
drive?
slash, just like
So
you
wait,
can put a Claude.
why do you want it to read in all your different CLAUDE.md files for all the different projects
It
for your
just
existing
the
project?
parents. It just goes up. It doesn't go to all the different projects or siblings, or
Oh, I
cousins or
see.
whatever.
I see. Okay, because so maybe I'm not
So
understanding. Is like how
it's
you've
like it's a scoping thing. So I
that
have
makes
one
sense.
file that's in my home directory. That's everything I do. All of
Oh,
my projects are under my home directory. So this one
yeah.
then becomes, it's automatically injected in all of my work. And then if
Okay.
I have, um, like for example, like for employer work, job work, I have home directory MD, and then under that I have a company name directory where I've cloned all of our code bases,
I
and so
see.
that's solid there. So I have a small MD file there. That's the kind of the context of, here's all these different repositories that have all these different responsibilities, just
Okay.
so that if we're in one project and it knows then that these other things exist, then it can say, okay, well, that's actually because
I
this
got
other
it.
service is having a problem, and I'm going to go look in that directory and
Oh,
understand what the API is or something. And so then like
I
that
see.
gets pulled in, and then the repo itself has a CloudMD for repo specific stuff. But then you can also go in further. So like if you start your Claude session in the base of a repo, and you have under your docs directory, you could have another CloudMD that won't get pulled in unless Claude goes to read a doc file. And when it enters that directory for the first time, it'll load that file, that Claude.md. And same with under your source
Okay.
directory or under anything else. And so you can have all these little bits of extra context kind of scattered
Yes.
all over the place. And when
Okay.
Claude goes to read something from that area, it will just get that so that it kind of can orient in that directory properly.
Does CLAUDE do that automatically, or is that something you have in the harness here?
No, that's the harness does that. It didn't used to do that, but it does that
Mm.
now. And I don't leverage that too much, but there's a little bit of, I'll have an extra 100 tokens or so just to kind of, and that's again from watching it. So I'll see that when it goes into this test directory, it always does this weird thing where it goes and tries to look up a certain pattern, and this project is different and it doesn't follow that pattern. So let's just
Mm.
put in a little blurb, 2, 3 sentences that says we don't, try not to call it the things that we don't want, to just say in this project we follow XYZ. And so that one sentence or two sentences gets dropped in anytime Claude goes to read one of those files under that
Hmm.
directory, and then that that weirdness that it was doing never happens again because it understands what the right pattern is to look for.
Okay, so you try to include CLAUDE.md files in different places to basically give Claude context that it might need if it's ever traversing around those different places.
Yeah, but keeping it super minimal and generic, and um, like it shouldn't be anything that's actually tied to the
A specific
implementation.
project.
Really,
Okay.
a lot of if you run /init in a new project, Claude will go kind of fan out, and it'll come back and it'll make up a nice directory tree diagram or something that now has to stay in sync forever. And anytime you go add a new directory, you need to go
Right.
update this MD file because otherwise it won't think it exists.
You're right.
So just skip all of that. It shouldn't anything that it can easily discover just by agent search. If it
Yeah.
can rep it or have a subagent go fan out and do some stuff and discover it, great. But if it's always every time it goes to read your test files, it does slightly the wrong thing, just drop a sentence in that says what the right thing is, just so that it stops because otherwise it wastes 5 tool calls right there, and
Yeah.
it figures it out, but like that's a bit of a waste of context window that doesn't give you any value whatsoever because it has to rediscover the same pattern over and over and over again. And so it's just easier to put 20 tokens in that just gets automatically put in.
So you have this harness in your skills directory, like a skills repo that you shared. In there, part of that, which part of that actually goes and references? Is that part of the autonomous development, like Bash script?
No. I'm talking about just what Claude Code does, like the CLI
Oh,
harness,
I
and
didn't know that. Okay, so Cloud
it does
Code
all of these
automatically would do
things.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, my mistake. Okay, I see now. That makes
yeah,
sense. Okay, um, got it. So you okay?
yeah.
That makes
I
much
mean,
more
I've
sense.
got feelings on a lot of these little features that Claude Code puts in. Like they keep adding stuff and shipping more stuff, and I don't think
Yeah.
most of it is the right thing to do for the majority of
Mm,
cases, because that goes back to the bitter lesson thing of you're trying to create this really intelligent scaffolding for the model, but if you drop that all away and just let the model do its thing and throw more tokens at it so that it's allowed to go explore more and understand more, it's going to do better. And I find that that's almost universally the case. A lot of people are using pi now as a harness. I don't know if you've seen that one.
no.
Pi.dev, very, very tiny, minimal harness, barely does anything at all. Very extensible. If you want to add extensions and stuff to it, you can, but it's a very, very thin layer, and it works really, really well because it doesn't do anything. It just lets the model do what the model does. And I think it's just
Pi.dev,
pi.dev. Yeah.
pi.dev.
Yeah, PI like the number.
I went to pie.dev and it actually goes to HTTP bin,
Oh, sure.
which is interesting. Someone decided to host that. So sorry. So you're saying that um, the goal is so you think that Claude Code is shipping too many. They're almost taking the Rails approach where they're shipping like everything you could possibly do. They want to put it all in Claude Code instead of something minimal and extensible. Is that what you mean?
Yes, I mean, I wish it was even taking the Rails approach because then it would be more coherent. They're just shipping stuff, um, and not all of it's good. They have walked back some things, but I'm not a big fan of just how many changes come in constantly that makes the models do stuff slightly differently. And I'm not a big fan of the Claude Code harness, but I want the Claude model because that's what
You're not a
I
fan of the Claude Code harness, because my experience, like I find Claude Code. Well, I mean, okay, Klein in the past was always really good. Like Klein was probably my first favorite harness for doing any sort of like agentic software development. It was really good. But then I actually found like Claude Code, the harness was fantastic, and I've only kind of used that one,
yeah.
even compared to a lot of the other ones that are out there. Do you still not you don't feel that's the case anymore?
Um, it was. I mean, it was the first, right? So by
Yeah.
kind of nature, it was the best because that's all that there was. But now we have. I think most of the alternatives are actually better,
Hmm.
probably. But you're not allowed to use your subscription with those.
Yeah.
There's
Right.
a
Locked in now.
non-zero chance of having your account locked out and not being able to call the Anthropic API on that. And
Mhm.
the subscription is such a ridiculously massive discount that I will put up with the Claude
Yeah.
Code harness just to have that. Because like the $200 max plan, if you're fully leveraging that, is actually good for about $3,000 worth of
Yeah.
API credits. Um, Insane value there, and
Yeah.
that is worth putting up with the nonsense that they keep shipping. So that's about it on that front. But like if I ever did have to pay API rates for things, then I would do something else. I think just not sure what that would look like. Also, I mean, the harnesses don't have to do much. Is the
Yeah.
other thing. You really don't even need to give them proper tools. You can get away if you let it write bash. If you have a single tool called bash, that lets you do everything else,
Mm.
because you can then just tweak your system prompts a little bit. So you can give it the concept of skills. It doesn't need a skill tool. You can say just go cat the skill file under this directory, and you can have your harness can do the same thing that Claude Code does,
Mm.
where it just grabs the name and description metadata
Right.
from the skill file and injects that into the system prompt.
Right.
And so like you can do a little bit of stuff around the system prompt management there, just so that it knows kind of what exists in the world. But beyond that, just let it run stuff, and it can run all the normal Unix core utils things effortlessly. So that's all it needs really, is just a bash tool to go run commands, and it can do everything else from there. And that's maybe not the most efficient. I think there's different ways to do file editing and stuff. That's worth a dedicated tool or two, but for the most part, you don't need them. And then the harness really is doing nothing at that point, and the harness is just running API calls in a loop. Um, it's kind of just Ralph at that point, even.
But what you're saying is basically it's not that hard to build a effective harness anymore. Like,
No,
and you think that like the Claude Code harness is not the best what out there, but we're kind of locked in because you can't use your like the deal that you have, the discount you get through using them with, quite frankly, one of the maybe the best model in the world right now. There's no better place to do it. So it's not bad enough that you switch off of it.
yeah, it's definitely like it still works. It gets me what I need. It
Yeah.
just does a lot of stuff, and they keep making it more complicated and adding features. And it's
Yeah.
one of those things where like this could have just been done.
It's
I
true.
I really like the idea of software that's finished.
A hundred
And
percent.
like I never need to worry that the LS is going to change under my feet, because that is a
Yeah.
finished program.
Yeah.
I'm sure that it still gets maintenance doing something, right? I
Yeah.
don't care, because I know the features are not going to change. It's going to
Yeah.
list contents of directories for me, and it's going to have some
Right.
flags to do stuff for me. It's done, right? Most core utilities like that are completed finished programs that
Yeah.
you know just sit there. I think agent harness should be that kind of a thing, where you're just connecting it to different models as the models get better over time, but
Mm-hmm.
otherwise doesn't need to do anything. You don't
Unless,
need to
well, there's
inject
some
it.
specific things, like for example, how you have some of those keywords in your CLAUDE.md files. Like there's some specific things that you can do to like improve or optimize your use of a particular model. But I think that's becoming less and less common given the RLHF, like the reinforcement learning
Yeah,
that's being done on all these models now.
yeah. Well, so that's exactly the bitter lesson thing, though, is that
Mm.
the capabilities of the models are going to increase better than whatever your intelligently designed fancy harness is going to do.
Okay.
Um, and so the harness, they do a lot of stuff to try to like babysit it into being better in some way, but that makes it worse in other ways. And there's a
Right.
weird balancing thing going on there. And just when the next model comes out, that problem's probably not going to exist anymore, but we still have all the cruft of that being baked into the harness now, because the
Yeah.
other model needed it.
Yeah.
And like you only need like the very thinnest layer here, to do these things. You could literally do it as a bash script that's just running curl and JQ to do the API stuff.
Mm-hmm.
um, and that would for especially these top models, if you're doing new GPT or doing Opus, that's all it needs at all, and you will get excellent results from even just that.
So when are you going to be making your own harness that uses all these skills and the approach you use with different models?
I mean, I've made a couple.
I
They're
remember.
not
Yeah.
complicated. I made one a couple of weeks ago that's just in pure assembler, even because it doesn't need anything. I just wanted to see what that was like.
Yeah.
What is this? And it's kind of cool because the binary, then the resulting program was like 7 kilobytes or something, and it uses no memory whatsoever
So
other
awesome.
than what gets allocated for handling the JSON messages. And
Right.
it's super lightweight. You could run it on literally a potato probably, and it doesn't take anything. Is the key bit right now, I think. Like
It's
it's
just the cost.
like
Yeah. The cost
yeah,
of the
yeah,
tokens.
like it's literally just the cost on the. You cannot call the API. You can, right? I've done that before too. Of you can pretend to be Claude Code and go through the
Right.
OAuth flow like
But you don't want
that
to
and get a
risk
token. But and I
your
don't like.
account.
Did you see the drama around that back a couple of months ago with Open Code? They cut off every Open Code user.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. I did.
and I'd just rather not have to deal with that. I like my cheap tokens. They're really
Yeah.
good tokens. They're very valuable tokens. I would like to keep having them
Yeah.
at least.
Yeah.
Um,
That is
and so
until more and more of these. I mean, eventually these open source models are getting better and better. They're probably already caught up to Sonnet 4 in some cases.
yeah,
That's pretty
well,
damn good.
I mean, that's the silly bit too, right? Is there are models that are equivalent or better than what I was doing last year,
Yeah.
right? And so these skills would feed into those models and get me what I want.
But you want the best.
But there's still the quality is not quite the same,
Yeah.
and it's just I better exist.
Yeah.
By the time there will be by the summer or by the fall even an open source model that matches what Opus 4.6 will do.
Mm-hmm.
But there will be an Opus 5 or something at
Yeah,
that
I
point.
know.
And then why do I want Opus 4.6? I'm never going to use
Right.
Opus 4.6 again, even though I could get 4.6 quality from a cheaper model. Maybe it's a tenth of the price or something.
Yeah.
I still want the better one.
I get that. Yeah, and then the question is like, at what point though is it good enough for if it's doing everything you want it to do, which it kind of is right now. Like Opus 4.6 right now is building everything you want it to build with your skills system. Like, have you run into anything with your skills that you have that it has not been able to build?
No. One thing I thought, because I'm doing some silly stuff here just to try to push it to see where is this actually not capable yet. And so I had it writing actually x86-64 assembly, building a multi-threaded concurrent runtime inspired by Go's, where it's got Go routines and it has a work stealing scheduler that can multiplex everything across operating system threads. I thought this is really some tricky stuff. This is complicated. There's a lot that could go wrong here. And it did it really, really well, but there was a couple of small bugs. I mean, it worked through, there's big bugs at first and it worked through them. You get the feedback loops dialed in correctly and it can just work through them and it'll do that. But there was a Heisen bug in some of the multi-threaded code where Go routines would silently just disappear, like they get orphaned somewhere in space. But if you added tracing or telemetry to try to observe that happening, that would change the CPU timing enough that it would stop happening.
Oh.
And so when you go to measure the
crazy.
thing, you change the thing you're measuring, and that was really, really difficult. I didn't think it was going to solve that. It was churning for probably 12 hours trying to figure that out. And then I stopped it and I said, okay, this is, I think, not working. It was doing Ralph loops the whole time too. So it would spin up, it would look at it with fresh eyes, it would look at the bug ticket, look at like the previous investigations, it would try to, and it would just kind of keep churning on it. And I was like, this is not going anywhere. This is a really hard one. I don't fault it at all because I think people would struggle with this one a lot too, the way that this is presenting. But I said, go open a new TMUX session and launch Codex over there and pair with Codex on this. And they talked through the problem together, and they solved it in about 3 hours.
Okay, hold on.
And so
I can't believe you're only talking about this now.
Sorry?
I can't believe you're only talking about this now after we've been talking for like over an hour here. Like, okay, so this is for the people that are dedicated to watching this whole thing through. You'll catch this. Okay, so walk me through this. You have Codex and so many questions. So you have Claude Code, and you're using your skill system, and it's building this thing that's trying to solve this bug, which I want to come back to like, how are you just manually prompting it to try to solve the bug, or is there something built into your? Okay, so the skill
No,
systems,
it had a goal of, here's the plan of implement this crazy multi-threaded runtime thing,
right?
and it had a bunch of tickets and it's working through those and
Yeah.
everything was good. But at the end of the plan, there's validation of like, does this thing work? And we're writing tests and we're writing load tests and we're writing a whole bunch of different stuff to try to make sure everything is working properly. It came up with this concept of a soak fuzz test, which I'd never really thought of or heard of before, but it's basically a soak is, it's a thing. It's where you just let your system run under, not under full load like a load test would do, but it runs it looping through all of the different permutations of configuration that it can have.
Oh,
And
it
so
sounds like, I mean, it's fuzzing, but it's
it's kind of
configuration
fuzzing, but
based.
through yeah, it's fuzzing through the set of configs basically. And so like for a multi-threaded runtime, it's, how many operating systems are we running here? The default is however many cores the CPU has, but that will, if you've got 12 cores, that will behave slightly different from 8 cores, which will behave different from 1 core if you disable
Right.
it. Like you
Okay.
run it,
Yeah.
make it run single threaded. So run it through all of those
Makes
and run
sense.
load testing things against all of those and let that go. And so it was going and it was running those for 12 hours or so, and it was finding failures in certain configurations. And it goes, okay, well, what is that? And it would create tickets then to go track that, and then they would keep running the autonomous loop then to resolve
Right.
those tickets.
I
And
see.
it worked through almost all of them. I mean, it found a ton off the start, and then it would incrementally do just test-driven development. So, okay, the soak found a failure. Let's write a test that reproduces that failure, and then figure out how to make the test pass. And it knows how to do that. It did that great until it got to this one final situation where you could run the soak for 5 hours, and at the 4.5 hour mark, one of the results would come back that this thing should have iterated 10,000 times and iterated 9,999. And where did that extra go routine disappear to that should have put in that last result?
Yeah.
There's something wrong here. And that was very, very sneaky, and it ended up being I think ultimately like a 5-line change or something like that. It was the ordering of one instruction. Again, it's assembly, so it's
Yeah.
literally the machine instructions here of load something into this register, go do
Yeah.
this, and it just had one thing that like it moved a value on line here when it should have done that 6 lines earlier or something like
Okay.
that. And it was just an ordering thing there that caused the scheduler to just very, very rarely just drop a go routine. And that was incredibly sneaky to track down. And but with a bit of help, it got there.
Okay. I want to understand though how you did this. Like you had Claude code call to pair programming with Cursor,
With
or sorry, with
Codex.
Codex, which was in another through a TMX session. Like, tell me.
Yeah.
So was this you had to manually step in and do this?
That was where I saw, like, it was spinning on this problem for at least 12 hours. Like I went to bed, I got up the next day, it was still trying to figure it out. And I thought, okay, I don't have a whole lot of confidence you can do this independently. Maybe we need a different perspective on this. So tmux is just a command line tool that has commands on it for sending keystrokes and for capturing pane contents. So it can take basically a snapshot where it gets all of the ASCII that's in
Yeah.
the other terminal, and then it can read through that, so it can see what Codex has wrote. There's also a scroll buffer in there, so if Codex dumped out a whole lot of stuff, Claude can page back through it. But basically, Claude then just works with Codex the way a person would, where you just type, like you can run the send keys command, and it types those keys, whatever the message that Claude has is, it'll type it into the box, hit submit, Codex will go do its thing, and so then it's just pair programming, and Codex would come back with, I found X. And Claude would go, okay, well, so while Codex is doing this, I'm going to go look at this other thing. And then they would, be looking at different aspects of the problem and doing all that.
I'm
I
trying
didn't
to
give
think
them
of.
instructions on how to do any of that. By the way, I just said, open a new tmux session, run Codex,
Okay.
and use it as a pair programmer. That was my entire prompt.
Oh my god, that's crazy! So you just told it to open up a new TMX session and use Codex to do pair program through this problem. Did you say like through this ticket, through this problem you're working? Like, what did you point it towards?
Yeah, I think there's a little bit. My wording was probably longer of just like, I've noticed you're having a struggle with this one. New Claude session, by the way. Like I stopped the loop, started up a new session. I said, here's a ticket. with describing a bug. I've noticed it's taking a long time, and we're having problems with it. Work through it with Codex, like open a new TMX session and pair program with it. And so then it knew what the bug was, I guess, that it was supposed to do. It told Codex what the bug was then, and they just started going. And I walked away. I came back 3 hours later, and it was fixed. And
Why do you
that was
think
the end
that
of it.
is? Do you think it's because Codex just gave it a different, like Codex is better at solving these problems, or that it's giving it a different perspective, like a different perspective? Perspective is a weird word to use with LLMs, but a different like training model that like attacks the problem a little differently, and having those two together is better, than greater than the sum of their parts.
I think there's a big factor there. Like I know that Codex has this reputation for being kind of relentless. Once it's,
Hmm.
you've given it a task, and it will boil all of the oceans in the world to make that happen, even if it clobbers 90% of your code base in the process. It will get
Hmm.
that thing done for you. So I don't want it to go nuke 90% of the code base if it goes crazy here, because
Yeah.
this is a really weird bug. And if you, because it's all multi-threaded code too, so this was, if you had telemetry or tracing to try to catch it, that changes the timing between the two threads enough that it never happens again. And I mean, maybe that's a fix. You could just like leave the tracing there and then walk away, but that's not right.
Yeah.
So, I know that Codex will kind of do this relentless thing, or at least that's what I hear from people. And but I know that Claude is good with keeping focus on the goal here and not
Okay.
destroying the world in pursuit of the goal. Like it does the right kind of higher level thing, and so then using Claude to oversee Codex to keep it in check, I
Okay.
think worked really well. But
Yeah.
also, they were working through the problem differently, because Claude still has subagents, and so it would send something to Codex and say, okay, we should probably, what do you think of this? And Codex would start going and doing stuff, and then it would also have subagents simultaneously doing stuff. And I
Hmm.
have no idea where the magic was in the process. Um, I'm pretty sure I did actually have Codex take a crack at it first, though, and not get anywhere obvious with it.
Okay.
Um, and so then that was okay. I don't want to go figure this out. Maybe this is the deal breaker. That means that this task was beyond the capabilities of the current models or something. Maybe I found my, that's what I'm searching for, is where does this break? What can they not actually accomplish at this point? Um, and so it was just get them to work together on it. And again, you don't need a person in the loop there at that point. It's just,
Hmm.
okay, so maybe the models individually are not quite there, but in aggregate, AI is there and can
Hmm.
solve this kind of problem. Um, that's just weird, right? And then aside from that really, really tricky bug that needed this, AI pair programming situation happening, everything else it just does.
Yeah.
It can. I've not had Opus fail at delivering a good solution to anything I've given it you know, since 4.5
4.6.
in
Oh, 4.5.
the end of last year. Yeah.
Wow.
Um,
That's wild, man. That's a crazy story. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind for big problems is to have a pair program codec. That's crazy. I never heard of that, and that's just the implications of that are crazy. One last thing,
yeah.
just you mentioned a Heisenberg. I've never heard that term before, but I can guess that it refers to Heisenberg and like cross quantum mechanics, where you by the act of observing it kind of makes the bug kind of not show up. Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, I've used that term, I'm pretty sure, years back with some weird rail stuff, actually, that again, that you kind of you try to measure it and it
Yeah.
stops happening, or the thing that you're measuring doesn't actually align. Like it changes the measurement enough that it
Yeah.
doesn't match with the thing that you're ultimately trying to measure. But I didn't use that in this case. That was Claude summary, was
Oh,
there's a
cool.
Heisenberg here. And
Wow.
so he's trying to work on it, but that's very difficult because you're kind of stabbing in the dark a lot
Yeah.
with come up with a theory and see what happens and if the bug still exists or not, because when you actually go to watch it in action, it goes away. um,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
that's like the trickiest kind of problem, and I'm sure that humans would have struggled with that same one
For sure.
for quite a long time.
For
um,
sure.
the best expert humans that have done a lot of assembly in their life have probably,
Oh,
they probably have some mental guardrail there that they know a pattern that would have prevented it or something like
yeah.
that. But that's not, you know, that's 100 people on the planet or something like that at this point. Like
Very
there's
small
not
at
a
this
whole lot
point.
of
Yeah.
folks who are doing, you know,
regular
massive
assembly programming.
scale performing, assembly programming at this kind of level too. A lot of, if you're doing assembly, it's because you're trying to work on very resource constrained microcontrollers or something like that. You're not trying to fully saturate a Threadripper, or, like, it's kind of the opposite problem, and
Yeah.
you're not doing high concurrency, high parallelism stuff like that. And so I don't know how many people have, I've worked with quite a few folks who've done assembly stuff. It's all very single threaded, go read this sensor, go put this
Right.
value over here, go do this, whatever. And they would not have ever touched a scenario like this, I think. And so I don't know how many actual humans would have solved this either. It's really weird state.
But the LLMs did, which is crazy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I have like 500 different things I want to talk to you about now, but I think we've gone long enough. It's been an hour and a half now. This has probably been one of our talks in a while, and I think that a lot of people are going to get really good use out of the skills repo that you put together. I know I'm going to make use of it, at the very least in my personal time, if not at work, because I think it just is going to be really effective. And you've given me a bunch of ideas now that like the sky's the limit on what to build. Like I kind of, again, every time I think about what crazy things could I do now that I have like the proper harness and methodology to go and do it. It's just the barrier to entry is that much lower. So thank you.
Yeah. I mean, that I would really like that to be the thing, right? Is like the barrier to entry for all of this should be nothing. You should be able to just install the app or something. We have, there's a Claude desktop app. Codex desktop is actually pretty decent as well. Okay. Install, whichever. You should be able to just paste in a blurb to that agent and have it go pull in, the skills or whatever, and set itself up with all of this. And you just shut it down, you open it again so it gets the new config there, and have it do whatever you want at that point. And I think like we're super close to that being the reality for all of this, is you just have stuff at this point.
I want to sorry, one last thing. I was going to ask you if you still use like a way of sending notifications to you during development, whether that's through Telegram or like notify.sh or something like that. Do you still do that? And if not, do you have, I know you haven't tried this, but like would Claude Remote not be able to do something similar? It's not going to give you notifications as you go, but it's going to be like a way of monitoring it in a sense.
Yeah, so I have I SSH from my phone, so I can kind of just see what's going on. I think the terminal works fine for that. I haven't tried Claude Remote yet, but I think it would be roughly equivalent experience, aside from if they've got push notifications or something. But again, going back to, I'm already hitting my limits. I don't need it to go faster necessarily, so it can just wait until I'm back at my desk for the most part.
But it's also like, I like to do it so I can see what's happening. I like to see kind of updates of what's happening. But I don't know if your skills repo has a way of like in the Git commits also doing a Git push, because if that's the case, then what I would do is I just monitor my Git repo on GitHub and see as it commits those changes.
Yes, I do have it. It does regularly commit everything that it does. It doesn't push them though, and I have that because I don't want stuff just going out into the world that I haven't looked at yet. So usually I'll come back and there'll be 50 commits or something, and I'll kind of go review the aggregate there and see, did all of this actually do what I wanted? I used to need to keep an eye on that. I used to actually go through it quite thoroughly and make sure everything was good with earlier models. That was when I had Notify SH set up as part of the shell script here. So every time I started a new loop, or if there was a human escalation ticket that got filed or anything like that, it would send me a push notification so that I would know, okay, my thing is broken here and I'm going to go back and figure that out. But the things don't break anymore, and I don't really need that, and I know that it's just going to work. And so there's a lot of it is just for my own gratification of being able to watch it do the magic or something, but I don't need that, and so I don't have push notifications anymore. I could do, I don't have, I'm not going to do the CloudBot thing. I have a thing for that though. That's maybe for a different conversation. An alternative there that I like a lot better, but I'm also not really using, because I want it to be when I'm at my desk. this is what I'm doing. And then when I
I
get up
see.
and go do something else, I want to go
Focused.
do the other thing.
You want to be focused on, yeah, you don't want it always on your mind,
Yeah.
because that leads to the whole AI vampire problem, which we briefly talked about before the call started. Is like, it's very easy to take over your life if you're always thinking about it,
Yeah.
and you get burnt out really quickly, and then it also loses the luster of it. It's like it takes over and is no longer as enjoyable because it just sucks everything out of you.
Yeah, yeah, because like you can give it tools. It can text you or something. Or you
Sure.
can have it. You can put it on a schedule or something to go do a bunch of stuff, and then ping you when it's done or do whatever. But I want to not do that.
Yeah.
That's just I want to be able to check out and say, okay, my work day is done here. I'm gonna go do other stuff. I'm gonna go enjoy dinner and enjoy my weekend. I might check in on the weekend, or I can go from my phone and I can say, okay, start the next stage of planning or something.
Right.
But that's not going to be what I'm doing that day. It's
Yeah.
just I can spend 5 minutes to write out a planning prompt or something and then let it go, and then I know it's going to be good for the next 5 hours, and I'll check
Right.
back later. I don't need a ping then because I know that it's going to be done at this point. Like I've got very high levels of confidence in this stuff. Like I know that probably for this level of complexity, I've done enough of these now at this point, and I've watched it enough times that I know for this thing, it's probably going to take 3 hours. If this one's really big, it's going to probably run overnight, and I'll check it in the morning or something. And so I kind of just know where that lines up, and I don't need notifications then because I just know where it's at.
That makes sense. Okay. Yeah, that's more. I think for me, the notifications are more of like, it used to be for notifying when I need to provide input, but then it became about like just of interest of us passively being able to go and see all the cool things. Like I would get notifications on my watch of like what it's built, and I just thought
Yeah,
that was really
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, like Notify makes that really, really easy, right?
Yeah.
It's just a curl call away, so you can just have Claude go put that into the shell script or something too. That
Right.
at this stage in the loop, you want to get a ping on it that
Yeah.
has this content. But that kind of stuff should be optional, I think, and not the default experience, because then you just start getting bombarded with all this stuff.
Then you end up with Cloud Code.
Yeah, that too.
And all the extra stuff. Anyways, I will let you go. This has been so helpful and exciting and energizing and wonderful, and I can't wait for the next one.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, thanks, Greg. I'll talk to you later.
Enjoy your weekend. Yeah, see you later.
You too. Bye.